Welcome to Live DAF, your online DAF Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem and welcome back to today's DAF Hayomi Maseches Bava Kamma DAF Ayin Vav. Being that DAF Ayin Vav and Ayin Zayin are rather short dapim, let's perhaps combine them together into one unit, into one shir, B'ezras Hashem. So on the top of DAF Ayin Vav Amud Aleph, at the first line, the Mishnah says, Ganav v'hikdish. So the Ganav stole the animal, and he followed it by doing a tvicha or mechira. Typically, shechting the animal or selling it triggers dalet v'hei, but not in this case. There's no chiyuv of paying 4 or 5 times as much. And the question is why? Amri. So the Bnei Yeshiva asked the following question. V'shloima atvicha lo mechayev. I can fully understand that when the Ganav does the shechita after being magdish, his stolen animal, he would not pay dalet v'hei. Why? The chika tavach, because the tvicha that he had just performed, the hegdish katavach. Did he do it on the animal belonging to the owner or an animal belonging to a hegdish? Of course it's hegdish. Why? Rashi explains. Because apparently the very fact that the Ganav has the ability to turn this animal into hegdish indicates to us that the original owner had already done yush. He had already given up any hope of retrieving his lost animal. In which case we have the yush factor combined with another factor, shina rishus, change of ownership, because the Ganav now took hold of this item. So that combination, yush and shina rishus, allowed the Ganav to make it hegdish. So now the hegdish actually takes hold. And when the Ganav does the tvicha on this animal, he is shechting an animal belonging to hegdish. And we know there's no halacha of dalet v'hei payments with respect to animals belonging to hegdish. It's not, re'eyu. It's not your equal. So in any case, we understand this halacha. The hegdish katavach v'loy, and it wasn't demari katavach. It no longer belonged to the owner. Elo, but here comes an interesting question. A hegdish lechayev. Skip the tvicha. Okay. What did this Ganav do? He stole the animal and then turned it into hegdish. By the very fact that he turned it into hegdish, what did he really do? He effected a change of ownership. It now belongs to hegdish rather than to a common person. So basically, he sold it. Mali machur lehedrit, mali machur leshamayim. What difference? Whether he sold it to his next door neighbor or to the hegdish. So this Ganav should have to pay dalet v'hei because he did a mechira. The actual hegdish, by its very transfer of ownership, that's called a mechira. So why isn't he chayiv? So the Gemara will endeavor to explain why, in some cases, according to some opinions, turning something into hegdish proper doesn't necessarily reflect a full change of ownership. How? Hamani Rab Shimon. We're going according to Shitas Rab Shimon. The Amar who tells us in many places throughout Shas. Suppose a person commits himself to bringing a carbon, rather than pointing to the animal and turning it into a carbon. He says, "I am going to bring a carbon." Then he designates, this animal for the fulfillment of his commitment. That's called Kachem Shechaya Bachar Yusam. He's fully responsible. What does that mean? Why? Because it was a personal commitment. I am responsible. So if something goes wrong with this animal, gets lost or stolen, he has to replace it. Bottom line, he has a vested interest. He has a financial stake in this animal. That is considered like partial ownership. According to Reb Shimon, it's considered in my possession, meaning I'm partial owner. Even though it's hegdish, but I have a vested interest. I have financial stake in this animal. I'm a partial owner. That explains the halacha, where the Ganav stole the animal, turned it into a hegdish, but since he's responsible for it, the process of turning it into hegdish was not considered a full transfer of ownership, a full change of hands, because the Ganav is still sort of holding on to it, and therefore it's not called a mechira. He doesn't pay dalet v'hei. Beautiful. Asks the Gemara, what do you mean? Hamid the Sefer Rab Shimon he? But since the next part of our Mishnah quotes Rab Shimon, Havi, Reisha Lav Rab Shimon. Apparently the first part is not Rab Shimon. So you can't present this explanation, which is based on Rab Shimon. Allah Ma'askinon, says the Gemara, another possible explanation to the Mishnah could be like this. Bekachim Kalim, the Ganav stole the animal and turned it into a lower form of carbon, a lighter hegdish. What's the difference? Because, once again, if it's just kachim kalam, like Rashi says, like a shlamim, he's still part owner. And therefore, there was no full transfer of possession, in which case, it doesn't equate mechira. Going to the Shita, the Amar tells us, kachim kalim mamen bailamhu. Kachim balim is still somewhat belonging to its owner, to its magdish. So that explains why when it doesn't, this type of hegdish, we don't treat it like a mechira. Uber shusei kaim, it's still his. But, says the Gemara, according to this way of thinking, that's only because it's kachim kalam. But if he would have made it kache kadashim, like an asham or a chatas, then a full detachment takes place. It's a full giveaway to hegdish. In which case, we would consider it like a mechira, and he would have to pay dal v'hei, right? Aval kache kache mai, what would be mishalim? He would have to pay tashlum dal v'chamisha. If that's true, why, when the Mishnah looks for a case where he has to pay, we sort of shy away from, a hegdish scenario. Stick to hegdish. Even with the hegdish context, in some cases you pay, like this case we just explained. Adatani Reisha. So let's go back to the first part of the Mishnah, where it says, Ganav v'tavach. He stole the animal, did tvicha, then the Ganav was magdish. In this case, since the shechita preceded the hegdish, he pays mishalim tashlim b'rav chamisha. That seems to be the only case where it works. Why do you have to come on? Why resort to a shechita before it was magdish? Even if the incident took place after it was hegdish, you can still find dal v'hei, as we just explained, if he turned it into kachim kachim, which is tantamount to mechira. Let's find a distinction within this case, within post hegdish situations, and we'll say like this: when is there no dal v'hei bekachim kalim? When it was just a lighter form of hegdish, as we explained. That's not a full giveaway. But if he turned it into a higher form of hegdish, which is a full giveaway, he would have to pay as though he sold it. So if it's true, why doesn't the Mishnah mention this? Ella, you're right. It doesn't matter. Whether the Ganav chose to make it a shlamim, which is kachim kalim, or a chatas, kachim kachim, either way, he's potter from dal v'hei, and the question is why, right? Regarding your question, let's go back to your question. Let him at least pay as though he sold it, because he fully gave it away to Shamayim. Mali machrila hedjit. Mali machrila Shamayim. What difference is there whether he sold it to his friend or to Hashem? Very simple difference. Very pashut. Machrila hedjit. When the Ganav sold the animal to his next door neighbor, that's truly a change of hands. Meikara tura du Ruvain, vashta tura du Shimon. Before sale, before the mechira, it was called Ruvain's animal, the Ganav's animal. Now, post sale, it's called Shimon's. A total and complete change of ownership, change of identity. But when he's magdish a carbon, you still are connected to that carbon. It's going to be credited to your account. It still relates to you. It identifies with its owner. That cannot be considered a mechira. Machar l'shamayim, if he gives it to Hashem as a carbon, whether this type of carbon or that type of carbon, it doesn't matter. It still identifies with its owner who's bringing the carbon. He's still connected to it. Meikara tura du Ruvain. Initially it was Ruvain's animal. V'hashta tura du Ruvain. Now it's also Shimon's ox. Right? So there's no real change taking place, and therefore you cannot compare it to mechira. That's the answer to the question. A Ganav steals, makes it hegdish, does tavicha his potter. Why isn't the Hegdish itself called a Mechira? Because it isn't. Now Rav Shimon adds, Rav Shimon Omer, it depends. If we're speaking about kachim for which you're responsible for, then you pay Daled V'Hei. Otherwise you're not. The Gemara figures at this point that Rav Shimon is not speaking where the Ganav stole the animal and did Tevicha. He stole the animal, he was Maglish, and did Tevicha because ultimately the animal certainly doesn't belong to the victim, to the original owner anymore, and there's no room to be triggering Daled V'Hei because of the Tvicha on a Shara of Hegdish. Rather, apparently, Reb Shimon is disagreeing with this aforementioned principle, this concept that we just came up with, that the act of making something Hegdish is not tantamount to Mechira. On that, Reb Shimon disagrees. He says, no, the actual Maasa of Hegdish, that triggers Daled V'Hei because it's considered like a sale. And Reb Shimon says, well, if it's kachim that you're still responsible for, then it would trigger Daled V'Hei. And the question is, what do you mean? If the Ganav is still responsible for the Hegdish that he made, that means if anything he has more vested interest, he has a bigger stake, a financial stake in the animal. So if anything, the fact that he's still responsible should give us reason to exempt him, to not consider the Hegdish as Mechir. It's not a full giveaway, he's still tied to it. Amri said, Bnei Yeshiva wanted to understand. He the son of Reb Shimon. True, let's say Reb Shimon holds different that we just learned, but he holds that, Hegdish is like a Mechir. Okay? Mali Machar Lahedit. Mali Machar L'Shamayim. Makes no difference whether he sold it to his friend or to the Shamayim. Assuming we're working with that principle. But it should go the other way around. It should be saying the other way. If the Ganav who made this Hegdish is still responsible, so still connected to him, Potter, it's not called a Mechira. Because it hadn't yet left his domain completely, he's still attached, he's still responsible for it. Whereas Kachim She'ena Chai B'Achar Yusan, Chayav. But if he's absolved from Achrayus, right? If it's a type of carbon that he's not responsible for, how's that? Let's say he said, this is the carbon, that's it, I'm not responsible, whatever happened. So in that case, it's a full giveaway. It's a full detachment. Chayiv. In this case, he should be chayiv Daled V'Hei as though he sold it, as though he gave it away. Because it's totally leaving his domain. So what does Reb Shimon mean? You're right, says the Gemara. He's not going on the halacha that you thought he's going on. He's going on a totally different halacha. Amri said, Bnei Yeshiva responded. You're right. Reb Shimon Amil Sachriti Koi. Reb Shimon is referring to a different halacha in the Mishnah. And this is the way we explain Reb Shimon. The Mishnah there says, Ein HaGoinev, this is back on DAF Samach Beis, Ein HaGoinev Achar HaGanav Meshalem Tashlum Daled V'Hei. So if a person robs an animal from a robber's home, there's no Daled V'Hei. And likewise, V'chein HaGoinev Hegdish Mi Beis Baalim Potter. Let's say a person had an animal which he made into a carbon. An owner made his animal into a carbon. A person comes and steals it. There's no halacha of Daled V'Hei. Why? My time. Because the pasuk in describing the halachas of Daled V'Hei says, V'gunav Beis Ha'ish. Only if it was stolen from the actual owner's home. B'leim Beis Hegdish, as opposed to the animal stolen from Hegdish. So bottom line is, there's no halacha of, this is the pasuk, by the way, of kefil. So there's no halacha of kefil when you steal from the Hegdish. If there's no kefil, there's no possibility of Daled V'Hei either, as we explained the other day, because there's no such thing as paying 2 or 3. So, bottom line is, there's no halachas of kefil or Daled V'Hei if you steal from Hegdish. On that comes Reb Shimon and says like this. Reb Shimon Omer, it depends. Depends how connected the owner was to his carbon. Depends if he still had a sort of a financial stake in the carbon, in which case it still relates to him. And when one steals it, it is considered having stolen from the owner's possession. Reb Shimon Omer Kachim Shechai B'Achar Yusan Chayav. If it's a type of carbon for which the owner is still responsible for, then if a person goes ahead and steals that, he's chayav. My time and why? Karina be v'gunav beisaish, because it is considered having stolen from the owner's, possession. The question is why, but it's still hegdish. It's not really his. So this we explained the other day. It's called davar hagoyrem l'mamin. Although the owner doesn't really own it anymore, it's hegdish, but he has vested interest. He has financial stake in this. It can bring about loss. It can bring about gain, meaning if he loses, he has to pay for the animal. If he holds on to it, he gains, he benefits. So, although it doesn't really have inherent value to the owner, it belongs to hegdish, but it can cause, it can bring, it has financial effect on the owner. That's called partial ownership. And that's called v'gunav beisaish. However, if he has no achrayus, v'she'ena chay b'achrayusan, then he's potter. Why? The loikarinan bei v'gunav beisaish. But if the owner is no longer responsible for the whereabouts of this carbon, he didn't take upon himself any achrayus, so it's not his mammon, it's not goyer l'mammon, and when a ganav steals it at this point, he hasn't really stolen anything from the owner, he stole it from the hegdish, there's no halachas of kefil, etc. Okay, so that's the pshat Reb Shimon. Now we fully understand what he meant to say. Here comes a new kasha. So we're saying that according to Reb Shimon, in some cases, by stealing an animal which is already hegdish and proceeding with tvicha, you pay dalet v'hei. But the question is like this: Michti. Let's think about it again. Shamini Reb Shimon, we happen to know that according to Reb Shimon, in order for the tvicha to trigger dalet v'hei, he tells us like this: the Amar, shchita she'ena ru'ya lo yishma shchita. What's the purpose of shchita? Is to accomplish heter, to permit the basar la'achila, right? So you can eat the flesh. A shchita which does not bring about that result is not considered a shchita. So with respect to dalet v'hei, he shouldn't be paying dalet v'hei. Why? When you do shchita on a carbon in your backyard, it's worthless. You're making it aser. Shchita she'ena ru'ya. It's not a shchita which makes it mutter. So there should be no dalet v'hei. The Gemara will present two terutzim to this question. Firstly, Kessler Rav Dimi. Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael. Amar Rabbi Yehuda. He quoted a teretz from Rabbi Yehuda. B'shechet mimim b'fnim l'shem balam. You're right. This was a full carbon. The ganav took it and brought it into the Beis Hamikdash, into the Azara, where it's meant to be. And that's where the ganav did the shechita. It was tamim. It was without blemish. It was a kosher behema. And in fact, this ganav was a tzaddik. He had the owner in mind. I'm doing it for him. Perfect. Meaning he didn't deviate. He didn't divert it. Perfect carbon. So the carbon is perfectly fine, perfectly kosher. Even a zar, even a non-kayin can do the shechita, right? So this shechita will trigger dalet v'hei. Asks the Gemara, well, that triggers another question. If in fact this carbon was shechted properly, so basically the carbon that the original owner designated was brought into fruition. It was actually realized. So the owner sort of got credited with this carbon. He got a check on his account. So basically the ganav returned the karen, the actual behemoth, to the owner. So it wasn't as if you give it back physically, you give it back conceptually, you gave it back to him. He got credited for the carbon. Although the ganav attempted to do so, but ultimately mishap occurred and the blood of the carbon spilled, and it was never actually, the avoidance, the process wasn't actually, carried through to the end. So the carbon was never really kosher. The owner never got back his carbon. So it remains a geneva for which the ganav is responsible for. Ravin quoted Rabbi Yechanan that we're speaking b'shechet mimim b'fnim shalei l'shem balam. In order to answer both of these questions with one teretz, what happened to the shechita ru'uya and what happened to chazru keren l'balam? So he says like this: Achav, the ganav took the carbon which was still kosher and did the shechita in the azara, but he diverted it He said, I'm not doing it for the owner. I'm doing it for myself. So in that case, Rashi brings the Mishnah in Zvachim. It's called Shaloi Lishma. The carbon is kosher, so it's still considered Shchita Ru'uya, but it doesn't count for the owner. The owner doesn't get credit for this carbon. It's somewhat puzzle, it's somewhat efficient. He has to bring another one, so the Ganav never really, so in effect the Ganav never returned the animal to the owner. He never got it back. And therefore he's still chayiv Dalad V'hei. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, it was a sheichet carbon tamim in the Azara. That explains why it's a Shchita Ru'uya. However, we have another approach. V'Reish Lakish Amar. Why is it called Shchita Ru'uya, proper Shchita, which triggers Dalad V'hei? We're not speaking about a carbon inside. No. V'Reish Lakish Amar b'Sheichet Balmum b'Chutz. This carbon became a balmum, a blemished animal, in which case it's no longer fit for carbon. And the Ganav shechted it outside the Azar, outside the Beis HaMikdash, as a regular animal. So it's called Shchita Ru'uya. It permits the basar for consumption, and therefore the Ganav pays Dalad V'hei. So we have two approaches. The Shchita was on a Tamim B'fnim, or a Balmum B'chutz. Tue bar Rabbi Lazar. Tue means he smelled, he took a deep inhale, meaning he analyzed the two terutzim we just explained. And he challenged them. Tue bar Rabbi Lazar. Rabbi Yochanan Shchita Materes, well, Zrika Materes. What was Rabbi Yochanan's teretz? The Shchita was a proper Shchita because it was in the Azara. But then what happened to the carbon? It became disqualified because the dam was spilled. So the Zrika of the dam is really matter the basar for consumption. We never got to that stage. How could you consider this a Shchita Ru'uya? By just doing the Shchita properly. It needs phase 2 of the Zrika. That's one question. Another question. The Reish Lakish, who says it was a Shchita on the Balmum B'chutz. The Shchita is a proper Shchita. Shchita Materetz. Since when is the Shchita allowing the carbon Balmum to be eaten? Valoi Pediya Materetz. It's not the Shchita that does the trick. You have to first redeem it. So if the Shchita was done before it was redeemed from Hegdish, so you can't eat this carbon. Says the Gemara Ishtamitze. So actually Rabbi Lezer seemed to have sort of forgotten the following concept. We're going according to Rabbi Shimon, of course, that was the whole point. He was the one who says you need a proper shchita, an effective shchita, a shchita that accomplishes heter. Well, guess what? There's another point presented by Rabbi Shimon himself, which will shore up these problems. Ishtamitze hada Rabbi Shimon. Hada Amar Rabbi Shimon. Kol ha'omed li zarek kizarek dam. V'chol ha'omed li padis kepadi dam. It is considered a proper shchita in both cases, despite the fact that there was no zrika. The fact that there was no pidyon yet. Because if the item is enabled for zrika, such as the case of the carbon, which was nishchat properly, the dam was there about to be nizrak. We consider it as though it went through the zrika process, because we have the material for the zrika. And therefore the shchita is called a proper shchita. Likewise, when it comes to redemption, we have the animal that can be redeemed right now, it's roi for pidyon. We view it as though it has that potential pidyon within it, and as though it was done. As though we've already arrived at that point. Meaning, in terms of the actual shchita, there's nothing missing. It's creating something that can have pidyon. You chose not to do pidyon? Okay, that doesn't matter. But there's nothing lacking, there's nothing deficient within the shchita if it enables for pidyon right away. Or in the case of the proper carbon, if it enables the zrika right away. And therefore it's called a proper zrika, a proper shchita, shchita ru'uya. What do we find that Rabbi Shimon holds of that? Kalayim lizarik is dam is something which is slated for zrika. We treat it as though it went through the zrika. The sign, Rabbi Shimon Omer. Yesh neisar shu metami tumas eichlan. Yesh neisar she'enu metami tumas eichlan. So Rashi explains. According to Rabbi Shimon, the only time a food will have tumas eichlan, will become tummy as food, is if it can be enjoyed, can be eaten, it can be benefited from. Either you can eat it yourself or feed it to a guy, but if it has no such function, then it's not considered food, it has no food value to it, and it's not going to be accepting tumas oichlin. So let's say we have a carbon whose flesh stayed overnight, became noiser. Right? When something stays overnight, it becomes pasul. You can't eat it. You can't even have a no. Question: is that basar going to have the potential to become tummy tumas oichlin? Says Rav Shimon, it depends. It depends if it had potential for edibility. Rashi calls it a shahas akosher, a point in time where it could have. There was nothing stopping it from becoming okay. So even though presently it's no longer suitable, as long as it had that potential, so it was inherently it had inherent food value to it. It was capable of functioning as proper food. It sort of now accepts that. It accepted that label, and it becomes tumas oichlin, has the ability to become tummy as food. So, in some cases, noiser is metami tumas oichlin, in some cases not. So, Shimon, yesh noiser b'shum metami tumas oichlin, yesh noiser she'enim tumas oichlin. Depends. If it had that capability, it had that potential to be mutar. Ketzad. Long lifnei zrika, enim metami tumas oichlin. Let's say the lina took place before the zrika of the dam. Right? So the zrika is really what allows us to eat the basar. It never happened. There was no zrika. So it never got to first base and never had potential to be eaten, to be consumed. And then it went through the lina process, it became pasul, so it was a non-starter. But lachas zrika. But if the noiser happened post zrika, because there was a moment in time when it was considered eichel after zrika. It could have been eaten. And here comes the punchline. Even if in actuality it never had that permissibility, it never had the heter achila, but if it had it in potential, v'kaimelan, listen to this, v'kaimelan, and we learned that when the Mishnah, when Rabbi Shimon says before zrika, after zrika, it means like this: my lifnei zrika, kodim shenira l'zrika. If the lina, the noiser, happened before the dam was available for zrika, meaning there was no time for us to do zrika during daytime, before the day was up, in which case the zman of the avodah expires. So if it happened at that point, there was no potential, and therefore it's not metama tumas oichlin. But la'achas zrika doesn't mean actually after zrika was performed. La'achas shenira l'zrika. As long as there was some sort of potential, capability to do the zrika. The Gemara explains, what does that mean? It was it overnighted before it was ro'if zrika. There wasn't enough time during the day to do the zrika. The shachli samach shkia Kamma. They did the shkita on the carbon a minute before shkia. Once shkia hits, that's the end of the day bell in the Beis Hamikdash. You can no longer do the avodah. So since there was no potential for zrika that day, and then the basar just stayed overnight and became pasul, it never tapped into its food identity. It never had the capability. It wasn't right for achila. If einem tamat was oichlin, it doesn't have the tumah. When Rabbi Shimon says la'achas shenir zrika lon, that the lina took place after it was right for zrika, the hav yeshuhus b'yem l'mizrikei. It was 10 minutes to shkia. If they would have hurried up, they could have gotten the dam off and onto the mizbeach. That is enough to trigger the eichel label, to attach the eichel label onto this food, onto the basar. What do you mean? Why? If you would tell me, okay, after zrika, the basar is now matam masay. I understand it's already roy lachil, but because there was enough time to do the zrika, why is that enough? Alma, clearly Reb Shimon subscribes to this concept of potential. Once you're there, even though you don't actually actualize it, but you could do it, you have all the tools, everything's right there, that's enough. the material is available, that means you've arrived to a certain extent. Clearly, when something is omed lizrak, it's about to do zrika, about to undergo zrika, we treat it as though you have arrived at that point with respect to, triggering all these processes and affecting, the other items involved. So back to our story. You did the shchita on the carbon bifnim, even though you didn't get to do the zrika properly. We said the dam was nishpach, it's spilled, you never got to the zrika, it doesn't matter. As far as the shchita is concerned, he brought it to the next level. He brought it to where he needed to bring it. So it's a proper shchita. There was nothing lacking in the shchita. He brought it to the threshold of zrika. And we learn this from the halacha of Tumas Eichlin, where Rabbi Shimon clearly subscribes to this halacha. Bringing it to the threshold is enough. And likewise, this relates to Rish Lakish's explanation. It was a balmum. The shchita took place outside the Azara, and despite the fact that there was no pidyon yet, and Rashi explains before, you can't even do pidyon anymore. Sorry. Even though there was no pidyon yet, at the point of shchita, it doesn't matter because it's omed lepadais, it's slated for pidyon, so the shchita generated something which is potentially okay and useful and available for consumption, and therefore it's called a shchita ruya. Where do we find this idea? In the name of Rabbi Shimon, the son. Rabbi Shimon, so, speaking about a paraduma, which once it gets advanced in its process, you do the shchita and the azar and all that. That's it. You can't have it anymore. It's not edible. According to Rabbi Shimon, it is metama tumas eichlin. It is susceptible to tumah that's unique to food. Why? Because there was one point in time, even after the shchita was done, where theoretically it could have been eaten. What do you mean? It's a paradum? It could have. Why? V'amar Rish Lakish came and explained this halacha. I mahayir Rabbi Shimon, because Rabbi Shimon himself told us a halacha that you could be paid, that you can redeem it if you find a better one. Para niftis al gabe marachsa. Maracha was the wood arrangement, the firewood arrangement, upon which they did the shchita and then they burnt it, right? So, even after they did the shchita in the right place, it's about to be burnt, you can still quickly redeem it if you find a nicer or a better one. Para niftis al gabe marachasa. So it has it carries that potential all along. So apparently potential counts. Capability has value. And since you could have been paid it and used it for your own personal use, it is considered eichel. And it's matama tumas eichel. Same thing with the case of the balmum, which according to Rish Lakish is the case of Reb Shimon here. Even though he didn't actually do pidyon, but he could have done pidyon, so the shchita enabled it, and it's called a shchita ruya. So bottom line is, why is the gan of chayav for tvicha and hegdish? Rabbi Yechana says it was a carbon tamim b'fnim. Rish Lakish says a carbon balmum b'chutz. Now we'll try to explain why each one chose his route as opposed to his colleagues. I can fully understand why Rabbi Yechon didn't hold like Rabbi Shimon and Lakish because he preferred learning the Mishnah speaking about even a regular hagdish, tamim, not a balmum. That's your typical carbon. El Rish Lakish. My taima. Why did Rish Lakish choose his approach? That it's a balmum as opposed to Rabbi Yechon. Amar lach, Rish Lakish responds. You cannot say that the Mishnah is speaking about a regular karchim timimim. Pasuk describes the ganav as either doing tvicha or mechira. We connect them. We align them. Apparently, you can't have one without the other. A situation which allows for Dalet V'Hei to be triggered by selling the animal will also allow it to be triggered by shechting the animal. But if you have a situation where you're limited, there's no potential for mechira, such as a carbon, right? Likewise, even if the ganav shechts it, there's no chiv of dalve. It has to go, it's a package deal, all or nothing. These carbonas, since if he sells them, there's no dalve. Less no betvicha. Likewise, there is no potential for tvicha. You can't have one without the other. And clearly Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. Even though you can't be chayev for mechira, but you can be chayev for tvicha. So Rabbi Yehuda and Rish Lakish are aligned with a different dispute they had elsewhere, which sort of lines up with this discussion, whether you could have one without the other. The Itma we have learned, Hamecha Treifa, Rabbi Shimon. So we all know that according to Rabbi Shimon, in order to be chayiv dal vei for tvicha, it has to be a shchita ruya, as opposed to a shchita on a treifa, an animal with an internal wound, where the shchita does not enable it for achila, so there's no dal vei for the shchita. What about if he's meicheret? He doesn't do tvicha, he does mechira. Rabbi Yehuda Amar chayiv. Okay, you can't do tvicha, but you can do mechira. Rish Lakish Amar potter. Why? Rabbi Yehuda Amar chayiv. Avgav less bit tvicha. He said mechira, even though you can't have tvicha on it, but you can have mechira. Rish Lakish Amar potter. You can't have one without the other. Given less of it tvicha, less of it mechira. If you can't have tvicha, you can't have mechira. Answer Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Yehuda, who said you can have one without the other, asked a kasha on Rish Lakish, who says it's a package. Answer Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon Lakish. Brisa says, Ganav kilayim utvacha. For Ganav steals kilayim, Rashi says, an animal born via a crossbreed between a kivsa and a taish. Okay, between a sheep and a goat. Okay, but and he shechted it, or he stole a treifa, an animal with an internal wound, and he sold it. Mishalim tashnum abar v'chamisha. So he pays in full. My love Reb Shimoni. Let's assume it's Reb Shimon, right? The very fact that the Brisa cited mechira by treifa, not tvicha, apparently it's Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon, he says that tvicha doesn't apply to a treifa because it's not a shchita, not a proper shchita, which enables it for consumption. But mechira does apply. Alma, you see, is not connected. Alma avgad less bit tvicha is mechira, even though you can't have mechira, tvicha, you can have mechira. Amalei Rabbi Yehuda responds, Loi, Rabbanani, I'm not going like Reb Shimon, who says there's no shchita by treifa. Going like the Rabbanon, who hold that even a shchita which is not matter the basar is still considered tvicha. So there's nothing lacking. Even a treifa has double potential. You can do tvicha, you can do mechira. Asks the Gemara, okay, so Rabbanon, but if we're going like the Rabbanon, why does the Brisa specify mechira? Treifa, but mechira isa bezvicha lesa? A treifa can have either tvicha or mechira. So why does the Brisa specify that he sold the treifa? But tvicha lesa, you can't do shchita, you can do shchita on it. So why does the Brisa pick only one? Elamai Reb Shimon. Okay, so what are you're insisting that that's an indication that the Brisa is Reb Shimon. And that explains why it only mentions mechira by treifa. But what about the other case, the kalayim? Kalayim betvicha isib mechira lesa. The Brisa says he did shchita on the kalayim. Only shchita is applicable to kalayim. You can't sell it and be chayav dal behei. There's no restriction in terms of kalayim, what you do with it. Ela tana tvicha v'odin mechira. So apparently, the Brisa just cited one example of two. By kalayim, it decided to pick tvicha, but really, it would be just as relevant to mechira. So, Ema the Rabbanan Nami. So even if the Brisa reflects Shitas Rabbanan, why did the Brisa pick, by treifa, did it pick mechira? It picked one of the two. Ema the Rabbanan Nami, Tana mechira, Wadin l'tvicha. By treifa, it picked mechira as an example. Really, it's just as well applicable by tvicha. So again, it's Rabbanan, not Reb Shimon. Has no relevance to our discussion. Rabbi Yehuda responds, no. Hi, you can't say that. If in fact the Brisa is Reb Shimon, in which case the treifa can only have the tvicha potential, the mechira potential, because the tvicha is a shchita she'ein ruya. So that would explain why the Brisa only cited one of two, Bishleim Reb Shimon, I did Tanei Treifa B'chada, since by Treifa we're limited to one case, which is the Mechira, because Tvicha doesn't apply to Treifa according to Reb Shimon, it's not a Shechita Ruya. So since we picked only one example by Treifa, so for symmetrical purposes, the Brisa did the same by the Kilayim. Tanei Kilayim B'chada, we only mentioned one potential offense by the Kilayim, which is the Mechira. So it's sort of symmetrical. Eli Amras Rabbanon, but according to you, it's Rabbanon speaking. Why pick and choose, narvinu nisninu, just put both cases together and say like this. Ganav kalayim b'treif, he stole either kalayim or treif, and he did whatever he wanted. Tavchan or machar, either he did tvicha or mechir on both. Mishal tashlom or b'chamisha. Right, if it's Rabbanish to say it like that, kasha, you're right. We leave it unresolved. Or now we'll discuss why at all you chayiv for kalayim. We'll see that by the Hashem tomorrow. So bottom line is like this. The Ganav took the animal, made it hegdish, and then the tvicha mechira. We know for the tvicha yipata because it's a hegdish animal. There's no tvicha there, right? Whereas the actual hegdish, why isn't it considered a mechira? More answer, because it's not really a full change of hands. It still identifies with the owner. Now, in the next piece of the Gemara, we were going on the case where the original owner made it hegdish, and the Ganav stole it and did the tvicha and mechira. So when he did the tvicha, actually, so Shimon says, well, if it's something that he's responsible for, the former owner, Chai Bachar Yusan, considered partially his, and you're chayiv for these things. The question was, what about the shechita? It's a shechita sheneruya. So we have two terutzim. Either we're speaking that he did the carbon kacham b'fnim, or according to Rish Lakish, b'amun b'chutz. Rish Lakish preferred his approach because you're not chayiv for the shechita kacham b'chutz, since there's no possibility of mechira. You can't do mechira, you can't do tvicha. On which Rabbi Yechon disagrees. He says you can have one without the other. Rabbi Yechon picked his example as opposed to the case of the Balmum because he wanted to learn that the Mishnah is speaking even by a regular carbon, which is a carbon, which is a tamim. And we got into we started discussing Kalayim, which will continue by the Hashem tomorrow. All the best to you and Atzlacha Rabbah.